The raw power of the ocean was a constant rhythm in Seaview Heights, a picturesque coastal town where jagged cliffs met the crashing waves. Every morning, the deep guttural roar of the Atlantic provided the soundtrack to the sleepy fishing village, a melody that both soothed and hinted at untold mysteries lurking beneath the surface. It was here, amidst the salty air and the cries of gulls, that you'd often find Ethan Vance, a man whose life was dedicated to finding the lost, the unheard, the voiceless. He wasn't your typical investigator. Ethan specialized in animal rescue, a field that often led him down paths less traveled, sometimes into the heart of human darkness. By his side always was Scout, a magnificent Labrador retriever, whose golden fur seemed to shimmer even on the cloudiest days. Scout wasn't just Ethan's partner. He was his shadow, his confidant, and the purest embodiment of loyalty Ethan had ever known. Years ago, Ethan, then a police canine handler, had found Scout discarded and forgotten a stray pup with eyes that held an ancient sorrow. They'd healed each other quietly, mending the unseen scars left by a world that could be both beautiful and cruel. Scout had retired early from canine duties after an injury, but his instincts, his nose, and his unwavering dedication were sharper than any tool Ethan possessed. Just last year, Scout had sniffed out a family's beloved cat, trapped for days in a collapsing storm drain, a rescue that had cemented their reputation as Seaview's quiet guardians. Ethan's mission was simple, yet profound, to give a voice to creatures who couldn't speak for themselves. Whether it was a runaway pet, an animal in distress, or something far more sinister, Scout was the key. Their work meant they saw the world through a different lens, noticing the subtle shifts, the quiet anxieties that others simply brushed aside. This unwavering focus had led them through countless small miracles, but nothing could have prepared them for the storm brewing in Seaview Heights. The town itself was a character, with its charming weather-beaten fishing boats bobbing in the harbor, and quaint antique shops lining the cobblestone streets. But beneath its idyllic surface, Seaview was insular, its residents valuing privacy and tradition. And towering over it all, a silent sentinel stood the historic lighthouse. Old, somewhat dilapidated, and shrouded in local legends of phantom lights and spectral whispers, it was a place the townsfolk rarely ventured near. It was a beautiful relic, yet it always seemed to hum with an unspoken secret, a tension that even the seagulls seemed to avoid. The unsettling quiet of Seaview Heights was shattered by the disappearance of Maya Chen. Maya was more than just a local student. She was a brilliant, compassionate young marine biologist whose quiet dedication to the ocean was legendary among her professors. She was known for spending countless hours down by the tide pools, meticulously recording data, her passion for marine life as boundless as the sea itself. But one crisp autumn morning, Maya simply vanished. Her research notes lay scattered on her desk, a half-eaten breakfast on the table, and a palpable sense of unease hung heavy in the air, like a fog refusing to lift. Local authorities, quick to assign blame or find a convenient explanation, swiftly labeled it a tragic runaway case or an accidental drowning. The treacherous coastline of Seaview Heights offered plenty of plausible, albeit heartbreaking reasons for such a fate, but Ethan felt it a persistent gnawing sensation deep in his gut that whispered of something far more sinister. It was a feeling amplified by Scout's behavior, which had grown increasingly peculiar since Maya's disappearance. Scout, usually a picture of calm and focus, began to exhibit an unsettling anxiety. A low, persistent whine would rumble from his chest, almost imperceptible to anyone but Ethan. He'd pace ceaselessly near the water's edge, his powerful nose twitching furiously as he sniffed the air with an intensity Ethan hadn't witnessed since their most complex search and rescue missions. But the oddest thing, his golden eyes, usually so observant of his surroundings, were now fixated on one thing and one thing only, the distant Seaview lighthouse. It wasn't a search for a person's scent, not exactly. It was something else entirely. A faint, almost imperceptible smell that seemed to make his fur bristle, a scent that carried a peculiar weight of distress. Ethan knew this dog. He knew his signals. This wasn't just a dog worried about a lost person. This was a dog reacting to something deeply wrong. This subtle deviation from Scout's usual predictable behavior was the first chilling twist in a story that was rapidly spiraling into a nightmare. It wasn't a simple runaway or a tragic accident. This was something darker, something calculated, and Scout, in his silent, persistent way, was telling Ethan that the true story of Maya Chen's disappearance was hidden in the heart of Seaview's oldest secret. Scout's unexplained anxiety pushed Ethan to look beyond the obvious, to ignore the easy answers, and to confront the uncomfortable possibility that something truly sinister was at play. In the quiet signals of his loyal companion, Ethan found the undeniable truth. Sometimes the quietest whispers speak the loudest truths. And as Scout continued to whine, his gaze fixed on the imposing silent lighthouse, Ethan knew exactly where they had to go next. The answer wasn't in the churning sea, but in the echoes of a place long avoided. The old Seaview lighthouse stood as a weathered sentinel, its granite skin scarred by centuries of salt and wind. Locals whispered tales of its isolated keeper and eerie lights, making it a place less visited, more feared. But to Scout, it was a beacon, a focal point for the unsettling scent that had drawn them away from the comforting familiarity of the town. As they drew closer, the rhythmic crash of waves against the cliffs seemed to grow louder, amplifying the thumping of Ethan's own heart. Scout's golden nose, usually so precise, twitched furiously, pulling Ethan along a narrow, overgrown path. The air grew heavy, not just with the ocean's tang, but with something else. A metallic tang, almost like ozone, mixed with a faint, unsettling chemical odor. It was a smell that made the hairs on Ethan's arms prickle, an unnatural scent clinging to the ancient stones of the lighthouse. Scout's low, persistent whine deepened a guttural rumble of anticipation and unease. The interior of the lighthouse was a decaying monument to forgotten eras. Dust motes danced in the sparse shafts of light that pierced the grime-coated windows, illuminating spiraling, creaking stairs. Every step echoed a hollow sound, swallowed by the vast emptiness above. The air was cold, damp, and thick with the scent of stagnant salt and old wood. Ethan's hand instinctively went to Scout's back, feeling the tense muscles coiled beneath his fur. This wasn't just a simple search. It was an intrusion into a place that seemed to actively resist their presence. Scout, however, was undeterred. He didn't head for the top or the typical keeper's quarters. Instead, he stopped abruptly at a section of the lighthouse wall, a place that seemed unremarkable. His paws began to scratch frantically at the weathered stone, his whine escalating into a desperate bark. Ethan, trusting Scout, implicitly knelt. The rough-hewn stone felt solid. But then he noticed it. A faint seam, barely discernible amidst the worn mortar, hinting at a hidden passage. With a concentrated effort, he found a cleverly disguised latch concealed beneath a loose piece of decorative ironwork. It was a masterpiece of deception, designed to keep intruders out and secrets in. With a grunt, Ethan pulled. The stone section of the wall groaned, grinding on unseen hinges, and slowly, painstakingly swung inward. What lay beyond was a shocking contrast, a jarring leap from crumbling history to chilling modernity. This wasn't more ancient stone or a dusty crawl space. It was a sleek metallic corridor, brightly lit by an unnatural clinical glow, humming with the faint, almost imperceptible thrum of unseen machinery. This was the second twist, a jolt of realization that sliced through Ethan's apprehension. The seemingly abandoned lighthouse wasn't just old. It was a cover, a facade hiding something deeply, profoundly unsettling. The air inside was stale, recycled, and imbued with that same unsettling chemical scent, now much stronger. It felt heavy, artificial, a stark contrast to the fresh, wild air of the coast. Scout's hackles were fully raised, his low growl a constant vibration in his chest. His usual inquisitive nature was replaced by a coiled tension, his every movement cautious, deliberate. This wasn't a place for casual exploration. It was a place of secrets, and those secrets felt dangerous. They moved through the sterile labyrinth, each corridor identical to the last, until subtle clues began to emerge. Faint biological residue on the polished floors. Discarded medical supplies in unmarked bins. Strange containment units lining the walls, empty now, but hinting at what they once held. And then a sound. A soft, ragged whimper, too small for a human, too distressed for a normal animal. It was a sound that tugged at Ethan's heart. igniting a fierce determination within him. Scout's ears perked his head, snapping towards a reinforced door indistinguishable from others except for the faint, desperate sound behind it. He pawed at it, his whines now laced with urgency. Ethan struggled with the heavy door muscles straining until it finally gave way with a hydraulic hiss. Inside, his breath hitched. Several small caged marine animals, rare bioluminescent fish, a tiny distressed sea turtle with an oddly marked shell, were held in what appeared to be observation tanks. They exhibited unusual twitching cloudy eyes and subtle physical alterations that spoke of manipulation, not nature. This was Ethan's moral turning point. This wasn't about a missing person anymore. This was about something far more insidious, a blatant disregard for life itself. Someone was playing God, and these innocent creatures were their pawns. Deeper within this hidden chamber beyond the tanks, Scout froze by another heavily reinforced door. This time, there was a faint, weak cough. Ethan's heart leaped. He knew that sound. It was human. With renewed vigor, they forced the door open, revealing a small, dimly lit room. And there, huddled in the corner, disoriented and frail, was Maya Chen. Her eyes were wide and unfocused. Her hair matted, but she was alive. She wasn't physically harmed in the way one might expect from a typical abduction, no obvious restraints or injuries, but her mind seemed fragmented. She whispered over and over about the studies and the changes, her words a disjointed, terrifying puzzle. Scout's acute sense of smell and unwavering instincts had directly led them to this horrifying discovery, saving precious time that Maya might not have had. It was a stark comparison between the picturesque, decaying lighthouse facade and the chilling, high-tech interior, a blatant display of deception. Seaview Heights, with its charming exterior and sleepy demeanor, harbored a dark, clinical secret beneath its surface. As Ethan looked from the distressed Maya to the altered marine life, a chilling realization washed over him. Appearances he thought were truly deceiving, the quaint beauty of Seaview Heights, the stoic silence of the old lighthouse. They were all masks. True heroism, he knew now, wasn't just about finding what was lost, but about looking beyond the comfortable facade, daring to confront the uncomfortable truths that lay hidden, and giving a voice to those who could not speak. The whispers of the ocean were loud, but the silent screams from beneath the lighthouse were deafening. And as Scout nudged Ethan's hand, a new, more dangerous chapter of their investigation had just begun. The air in the hidden chamber was thick with the dust of disturbed secrets and the faint, sweet-sick smell of decay. Maya Chen, fragile as spun glass, trembled in Ethan's arms, her eyes wide with a terror that seemed to look beyond the immediate moment into something vast and unforgiving. Scout, usually so boisterous, was a silent sentinel, his body pressed against Ethan's leg, a low, steady growl rumbling in his chest. His gaze was fixed not on the traumatized girl, but on a section of the wall beside them, a patch that seemed utterly unremarkable to the human eye. But Scout insisted. He nudged Ethan's hand with his wet nose, then pawed at the wall with an insistent whine. Ethan, whose trust in Scout bordered on the absolute, ran a gloved hand along the rough concrete. Nothing. Then a faint vibration. He pressed harder, and a small section cleverly disguised as a patch of uneven plaster clicked inward. Inside, nestled in a damp, tight cavity, was a small, sleek object. Not a weapon, not a diary. It was an encrypted data chip, no bigger than Ethan's thumbnail, humming with a barely perceptible electrical charge. This was the key piece of evidence, a digital whisper holding untold truths. Just as Ethan pocketed the chip, a nervous cough echoed from the corridor. Scout, whose growl had become a full-throated rumble, sprang forward, ears flat, body tensed. A figure emerged from the shadows. A young man, pale and gaunt, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and desperation. His clothes, though rumpled, hinted at a lab technician's uniform. Scout's initial reaction was aggressive, protective, but something in the man's quivering stance, his hands raised in surrender, conveyed raw fear, not malice. Ethan, sensing Scout's hesitation, reined him in. "Who are you?" Ethan demanded, his voice low and steady. The man stammered, Liam Beckett. I worked here." This was the third twist, a plot curve no one had anticipated. Not a new antagonist, but a conflicted insider, a pawn caught in a game far larger than himself. Liam's eyes darted frantically between Ethan's scout and the now exposed room where Maya had been found. "You found her," he whispered, a tremor in his voice. "And the animals. Oh God, you found them." Fueled by a cocktail of terror and an overwhelming tide of guilt, Liam began to confess. His words tumbled out, disjointed at first, then coalescing into a horrifying narrative. The facility, he explained, was a clandestine operation run by Dr. Eris Thorne. The name hit Ethan like a physical blow. Dr. Thorne, the celebrated marine biologist, the charismatic visionary whose public image was one of environmental stewardship and groundbreaking conservation. He was a regular on national news, his face plastered on scientific journals. But according to Liam, Thorne was secretly a ruthless mastermind, the architect of a monstrous endeavor known only as Project Chimera. Liam described a project steeped in unethical genetic manipulation and behavioral conditioning of marine life. It wasn't about conservation, it was about control. Thorne sought to create perfected species, adapting them to extreme environments, enhancing their sensory perception, even subtly altering their natural instincts. But the chilling secondary goal, the one that made Liam's stomach churn, was understanding how these radical biological and behavioral changes could be replicated or controlled in humans. Liam spoke of gene splicing, neural imprinting, and adaptive biosignatures, terms that painted a terrifying picture of science gone rogue. And Maya. Liam's voice dropped to a whisper. Maya hadn't been a random victim. She was too brilliant, too inquisitive. She had stumbled upon fragments of Thorne's true research, anomalies in local marine life populations, unusual data patterns in water samples. She got too close, too curious, and was brought in not as a test subject in the traditional sense, but as an unwitting observation subject. Thorne wanted to monitor her reactions, her mental state, perhaps even expose her subtly to certain influences, to see how quickly a keen mind could be disoriented, how easily a truth seeker could be silenced or dismissed. That was why Maya's mind seemed fragmented, Liam explained. He wanted to see how easily he could break her spirit without leaving a single mark. Liam's confession painted a horrifying portrait of Project Chimera. It was a dark reflection of humanity's insatiable drive for knowledge and power, twisting the pursuit of scientific advancement into a tool of absolute control. Thorne's motivation wasn't simply profit. It was a warped, almost messianic vision of advancing species of wielding ultimate power over nature itself, even attempting to cure human ailments by manipulating the very essence of life at its most fundamental level. He saw himself as a pioneer, unafraid to cross ethical boundaries to achieve what he believed was inevitable. His genius was undeniable, but his morality was utterly absent. The history of science, Ethan mused grimly, was littered with cautionary tales. From early 20th century eugenics movements to mid-century human radiation experiments, there had always been those who believed that the pursuit of knowledge justified any means. Liam, with his haunted eyes, was a living embodiment of the common mistake made by many young ambitious researchers. He'd been drawn in by Thorne's brilliance, the promise of groundbreaking discoveries, a chance to be at the forefront of something revolutionary. He made it sound like we were solving the world's problems. Liam choked out, like we were saving humanity. I believed him. I didn't question enough soon enough. His biggest mistake wasn't a lack of intelligence, but a lack of critical ethical scrutiny in the face of overwhelming charisma and the lure of scientific glory. The cause and effect were brutally clear. Liam's slow disillusionment, his simmering guilt, had directly led to his decision to help Ethan. But his fear, a palpable shaking presence, also made him a liability. Thorne's boundless ambition, unchained by any moral compass, had fueled these ethical violations, resulting in Maya's abduction and the silent suffering of countless innocent marine animals. As Liam finished his horrifying account, the stale air of the hidden lab seemed to press in on them, heavy with the weight of unspeakable acts. Ethan looked down at Scout, whose fur was still bristling. His eyes locked on Liam, but now with a flicker of understanding, a grudging acceptance. Scout knew betrayal when he saw it, but he also sensed genuine remorse. Science without ethics, Ethan realized, was not enlightenment. It was a weapon. And blind ambition unchecked by compassion inevitably led to unimaginable cruelty. The encrypted chip burned in Ethan's pocket. A tiny piece of plastic, yet it held the potential to expose a monster and shatter the carefully constructed peace of Seaview Heights. But first, they had to get out. The confession hung in the stale air of the hidden lab like a noxious gas. Dr. Eris Thorne. The name once synonymous with innovation and environmental advocacy now twisted into something sinister, a chilling epithet for the architect of Project Chimera. Ethan had often seen Thorne on nature documentaries, heard his calm, reasoned voice discussing marine conservation. That public persona, so carefully cultivated, made the reality of his ruthlessness even more shocking, like discovering a snake nestled in a bouquet of flowers. Thorne wasn't just a scientist. He was a manipulator, a true mastermind whose ambition knew no ethical bounds. "He'll know," Liam whispered, his voice trembling. "He knows everything that happens in this lighthouse. He'll know we found Maya. He'll know about the chip." As if on cue, a distant muffled alarm began to blare, a harsh electronic shriek, cutting through the underground silence. It was a sound designed not to be heard from the outside, but to warn those within. The chase began instantly. Thorne's operatives, unseen but clearly alerted, were already on the move. Ethan grabbed Maya, supporting her frail form, while Liam, newfound courage, mingled with abject terror, led the way through the labyrinthine corridors. Scout was a blur of golden fur, his bark sharp and urgent, a protective shield around them. They scrambled back through the sterile passageways, the whirring of machines growing louder. The clinical lights casting long, distorted shadows that seemed to chase them. Every turn felt like a gamble, every distant footstep a threat. The escape from the lighthouse was a high-stakes ballet of panic and precision. Scout moved like lightning, darting ahead, to check corners, doubling back, to nudge Ethan in the right direction, his body a solid barrier against any perceived threat. Once, as a hulking figure in dark fatigues rounded a corner, Scout lunged not to bite, but to create a loud, distracting bark and a swift diversion, allowing Ethan to shove Maya and Liam into a recessed doorway before the operative could react. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. They weren't just running from capture. They were running from disappearing forever, from becoming another forgotten experiment in Thorne's twisted world. That encrypted chip burning in Ethan's pocket was their only hope, the one weapon that could shatter Thorne's empire of lies. "We need to get to my car," Ethan gasped, half carrying Maya up the hidden stairs, the old wood groaning under their combined weight. Liam, though terrified, was surprisingly agile, scrambling up ahead, driven by the desperate need for redemption. They burst out into the Seaview Lighthouse, the cool, salty air, a shock after the stifling lab. The sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues, a stark contrast to the cold dread chilling Ethan's bones. But the relief was fleeting. As they stumbled out of the lighthouse, the rhythmic crash of waves no longer a comfort, Ethan felt the crushing weight of their situation. He was an animal rescue investigator, not a tactical operative. He had a traumatized girl, a terrified former lab assistant, and a loyal Labrador. Thorne had resources power and clearly no compunctions about using them. Ethan looked at Liam, who was shaking uncontrollably, eyes darting around as if expecting Thorne's men to materialize from the very air. Could he trust him? Liam was their only insider, their only guide to the complexities of Project Chimera. Yet his fear was a constant tremor. His guilt, a fragile shield. Scout, ever the silent judge, seemed to read Ethan's mind. He nudged Liam's hand gently with his nose, then looked up at Ethan, a soft whine escaping him. It wasn't a judgment, but an assurance. Scout, in his pure, unvarnished instinct, sensed Liam's true remorse, the desperate need for atonement. He was scared, but he was on their side. Maya's condition was another constant agonizing pressure. She drifted in and out of lucidity, sometimes whispering fragments of horrifying experiences. The sounds, the colors, they changed us. Before collapsing back into a disoriented state, her vulnerability added a profound weight to Ethan's mission. Did he prioritize getting Maya medical help, risking exposure, or securing the evidence, potentially leaving Maya vulnerable for longer? The animals, still trapped in the lighthouse, gnawed at his conscience too. The vastness of Thorne's conspiracy, the sheer audacity of it, threatened to overwhelm him. Ethan, despite his experience, made a critical error in judgment. He assumed Thorne's influence was limited to the shadows to the hidden lab. He underestimated the reach of a man like Thorne, a man who had built a public empire, a man with connections. He thought he could call the local police, expose Thorne, and it would all be over. It was a common mistake, believing that light always wins against darkness, especially when that darkness is cloaked in the guise of respectability. "I need to call Sheriff Brody," Ethan said, pulling out his phone as they hurried towards his nondescript rescue vehicle parked precariously close to the cliff edge. "He's a good man. He'll help us." Liam's eyes widened, a fresh wave of panic washing over his face. "No, you can't," he choked out. "Thorne, he has people, everywhere, even in the local authorities." Ethan froze. The words hit him like a physical blow. He stared at Liam, then at Scout, whose ears were suddenly perked eyes fixed on a black sedan, slowly pulling onto the winding coastal road, its headlights cutting through the dusk. It was the major twist, a sickening lurch of understanding. They weren't just being pursued, they were already compromised. The very people he trusted to uphold the law might be working for the monster he was trying to expose. The normal, bustling evening activity of Seaview Heights seemed to mock their desperate flight. Families walked their dogs, tourists admired the sunset, completely oblivious to the high-stakes game of cat and mouse unfolding in their midst. Ethan realized with a jolt that Thorne didn't need to be everywhere. He just needed to be in the right places, controlling the right levers. The local authorities, the very system meant to protect, could be just another extension of Project Chimera's vast, insidious network. "We're going underground," Ethan said, his voice flat, resolute. He shoved Maya gently into the back seat of his rugged SUV, Scout, leaping into the passenger side, his gaze unwavering on the approaching sedan. Liam scrambled into the back. Exposing dark secrets, Ethan learned in that moment, often meant navigating a complex web of deceit, where trust was a rare commodity, and even the most familiar faces could hide a sinister truth. The sunset, once a symbol of peace, now felt like a fiery curtain falling on the world they once knew. Their only path forward lay in the shadows, away from the corrupting light of Thorne's influence. The old SUV tore through the winding coastal roads, leaving the corrupted beacon of the lighthouse behind. But the shadows of Project Chimera clung to them. Ethan drove with grim determination, the encrypted chip a burning ember in his pocket. Maya, fragile and murmuring disjointed fears, was curled in the back, while Liam, pale and trembling, clutched the seat, his fear a constant bitter taste in the air. "There's only one person I know who can handle this," Ethan said, his voice raw. "Someone Thorne can't touch, someone who still believes in the truth." Liam, eyes wide, looked at him. "Who?" Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror, seeing the faint glow of the black sedan still trailing them. "An old friend, a journalist, Sarah Vance." His sister. He knew the risk, but Sarah had a reputation for fearless investigative reporting, her integrity uncompromised. This was their desperate plan. They spent a harrowing night on the run, dodging shadows and false leads, Scout acting as their silent alarm system, his barks sharper, his growls deeper whenever a new threat loomed. They moved through hidden coves and abandoned fishing shacks, always just a step ahead. Liam, despite his terror, proved invaluable, his insider knowledge helping them predict Thorne's moves and avoid traps. He detailed obscure backroads, defunct security camera blind spots, and even whispered about certain codes Thorne's men used. It was a terrifying game of cat and mouse, played out under the indifferent gaze of the Seaview moon. The climax arrived at dawn as they approached the bustling docks of the next town over where Sarah was waiting. Just as they pulled into a secluded alley, The black sedan screeched to a halt behind them, blocking their escape. Thorne's operatives, a trio of grim-faced men, emerged, their movements precise, menacing. This was it. The final confrontation. "Hand over the girl and the evidence, Vance." The lead operative commanded, his voice devoid of emotion. Ethan's grip tightened on Scout's leash. He shoved Liam and Maya forward. "Go get to Sarah's boat, the Morning Star. It's docked at Pier 7. Scout, sensing the ultimate threat, let out a deep, ferocious bark, unlike any sound Ethan had ever heard from him. It was a battle cry, a warning, a shield. As one operative lunged, Scout, with astonishing agility, ducked beneath his legs, sending the man sprawling. He then weaved between the other two, a blur of golden fur creating chaos and confusion, buying precious seconds. Ethan, with a surge of adrenaline, sprinted after Liam and Maya. Scout, nipping at the heels of the operatives, keeping them disoriented. They burst onto the pier, Sarah already standing by her old reliable fishing boat, a determined glint in her eyes. Ethan didn't need to explain. He simply shoved the encrypted chip into her hand. "Thorne, Project Chimera. Everything's on there. Get it out." As Sarah turned to board, Thorne himself emerged from the shadows, a chillingly calm figure amidst the growing chaos. "A foolish endeavor, Mr. Vance." Thorne purred, his voice like silk, utterly devoid of the calculated rage Ethan expected. "You cannot fight progress. You cannot fight destiny." He raised a hand, and more operatives appeared, cutting off their escape to the boat. Suddenly, Maya, who had been almost catatonic, let out a piercing shriek. "The colors, the sounds, they're coming for us." Her eyes, though still distant, were fixed on Thorne, a primal fear seizing her. It was a fleeting moment of terrifying clarity, revealing the true depth of Thorne's insidious influence, not just on animals, but on the fragile human mind. This was Maya's silent testimony, a testament to the fact that she was not just a victim, but a survivor whose trauma was intrinsically linked to the depths of Project Chimera. Thorne smirked, a cruel glint in his eyes. "A minor setback. She'll be re-educated." But just then, Scout, having cleverly lured two operatives away, returned with a furious bark, launching himself at Thorne's legs. It wasn't an attack, but a desperate strategic diversion. Thorne stumbled momentarily, losing his composure. That split second was all they needed. Sarah, quick as lightning, threw the engine into gear. The Morning Star roared to life, churning the water as it pulled away from the pier. Ethan, with Liam's help, hauled Maya aboard Scout, leaping agilely into the boat at the last second. They sped into the open sea, leaving Thorne and his men fuming on the dock. The news broke like a tidal wave. Sarah, fueled by Ethan's evidence and her own relentless pursuit of truth, exposed Project Chimera in a series of bombshell reports that rocked the nation. The encrypted chip revealed damning data, detailed plans for human trials, unethical genetic alterations, the suffering of countless innocent marine creatures, and the extent of Thorne's network of influence reaching far beyond Seaview Heights. Images of the rescued altered marine animals, coupled with Liam's detailed, courageous testimony, given anonymously, at first ignited a powerful public outcry. Justice, though slow, eventually prevailed. Dr. Aris Thorne, stripped of his public facade, was apprehended, his scientific empire crumbling into infamy. His operatives were rounded up, and the hidden lighthouse facility was dismantled, its sterile rooms now exposed to the cleansing light of day. The marine animals, scarred but resilient, began their long journey of rehabilitation at specialized sanctuaries, their unique cases serving as a stark reminder of unchecked scientific ambition. Maya, through months of therapy and the quiet, comforting presence of Scout, slowly began to heal. She found her voice again, not just to recount her ordeal, but to advocate for ethical science and animal rights. Her story became a powerful symbol of human resilience, a beacon of hope for those touched by unseen darkness. Liam, facing legal consequences for his initial involvement, chose a path of fierce redemption, dedicating his life to exposing corporate and scientific corruption, ensuring no one else fell into the same trap he had. He became a quiet hero in his own right, working behind the scenes, using his knowledge for good. Ethan and Scout. They remained Seaview's quiet heroes, recognized not with parades, but with the grateful eyes of rescued animals and the knowing nods of those who understood the true depth of their courage. The fight for justice, Ethan knew, was never truly over. There would always be shadows, always those who sought to exploit or control. But for every darkness, there was a light, a guiding star. And for Ethan, that star was Scout. Their bond, forged in mutual healing and tested in the crucible of danger, had grown stronger than ever. Scout, with his unwavering loyalty and pure instinct, had not only saved Maya and exposed a monster, he had reaffirmed Ethan's belief that intuition, compassion, and the silent wisdom of our animal companions are often the truest compasses in a chaotic world. As the sun set over Seaview Heights, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Ethan and Scout walked the familiar beach, the old lighthouse standing tall, no longer a symbol of hidden darkness, but a steadfast beacon of hope and a monument to the truth unleashed. And as the waves crashed, bringing new stories with every tide Ethan knew with Scout by his side, they were ready for whatever new horizon awaited. What incredible stories are waiting to be unleashed in your life? Do you have an animal companion who has guided you through a dark time or shown you a truth you couldn't see? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your story might just be the next beacon of hope.